Israel's military says that it has attacked the entrance gate of the Syrian military headquarters in the capital Damascus. Now, this comes after reports of Israeli drones striking targets in the southern city of Sweida. Israel has threatened to step up its involvement in Syria unless government troops pull back from the Sweida area. Syrian government forces deployed there have been clashing with fighters from the Druze religious minority after a ceasefire collapsed. Israel has been launching strikes in the area for 2 days now, saying it aims to protect the Druze minority and to keep the area close to its own border demilitarized. Clashes between Bedouin tribes and the Druze have escalated into a wider conflict, including government troops. All right, our Middle East correspondent Felix Tamsut joins us now from Jerusalem. Felix, Israel striking a military position near Damascus. Is this the next step in the escalation of this conflict?
Well, this is a very specific case. This needs to be said. We are not talking about a direct conflict between Israel and Syria, but rather a situation where Israel says it needs to protect the Druze minority. We need to remember the Druze minority in Israel plays a vital role in life, in many walks of life, in business, and of course in the army. We've seen stark reactions from within Israel, from the Druze minority, including within the hour attempts to go through the border, to go to Syria from the Israeli side and, in principle, fight and save their own community. So I think this is an incident that needs to be seen as such. Having said that, this situation could escalate further, and it remains to be seen what's the next step.
We know that the Israeli defense minister has promised that his country would continue its strikes until Syria's government withdraws its troops from the town of Sweida. Why is Israel so eager to support the Druze minority there?
Well, the most important aspect of this story is, of course, the Druze community in Israel. As I said, they play a very, very big role in Israeli society, mostly when it comes to their role in the Israeli army. There's the so-called agreement of blood, if you will, between the Israeli society and the Druze community. Most of them serve in the army. So Israelis see them as an integral part of Israeli society. The Druze community in Israel went on general strike due to the situation in Syria. And it also needs to be said that the general situation in Syria is such that Israeli forces are already within Syria. They have the so-called area of security at the border. And of course, the Israeli interest in Syria remains regardless of the attacks on the Druze community in Syria. But this, of course, is a big issue, and it's very present in public life in Israel as we speak.
Okay, DW's Felix Tamsut with the latest from Jerusalem. Felix, thank you. Well, here in the studio with me now is reporter Ghazi Yohannes. She is from Syria, and we've invited her here to help us put this all into context. Now, just a couple of days ago, we were talking about Bedouin tribes with the Druze. Now we're talking about the Israeli government getting involved and the Syrian government also being involved. How did this thing explode so quickly?
Right. This just goes to show how political and religious tensions can quickly escalate into a wider conflict in this region. It started with a conflict, but once a conflict with the Bedouins, but once the Syrian army was deployed to Sweida, which has had a lot of autonomy in the past, and it has been in charge of its own security, right? So this was a big change for a lot of people there. And there's a lot of mistrust within the community of the government forces because of the Islamist elements within its ranks. So when these forces entered, initially they said they were going to let them in, but then they went back on it because the news emerged of massacres, and then violent clashes started between Druze militants that are under the spiritual leadership of a leader there and between the security forces. So a lot of civilians have also been caught in the middle of this violent conflict in the city.
Well, now, explain to us the Druze in Syria. Why would they have a problem with the new Syrian government? Because they actually fought in the war that overthrew the Assad regime, right?
Right. They joined the revolution in 2023. They started protesting. And in the last days of the ousting of Assad, they also joined the battles. And they have a lot of issues with the current government because of the Islamist elements. Like I said, they have past experience with al-Nusra as well. Druze people in North Syria, not in the south, were targeted by Nusra militants. And there were casualties in 2015. So all of this built a lot of mistrust. And then recently there were other massacres of another minority, right, the Alawite minority on the coast. And so all of that piled up to this mistrust, and they didn't want the government to go in.
And this mistrust, could it also be coming from the fact that we've seen Western countries rushing to normalize relations with Syria?
Well, part of it is because of that rush, but they say they asked for a democratic government that represents everybody. And even though there's one, I think, Druze representative, they say it's not really a civil government that represents all the minorities. It's still extremely extremist in that way. And they don't really have a lot of trust in its security forces because of the past violations. And the Syrian state, on the other hand, says that it is these Druze militants that are to blame because they're carrying arms, and arms should only be in the hands of the Syrian state.
And then bringing Israel into this, why is the Israeli military getting involved?
Well, Israel has the Druze population as well, and the Druze in Israel, however, are very different to the Druze in Syria in their political views, right? A lot of the Druze in Sweida have been very vocal that they don't want Israel interfering on their behalf. However, after the recent events and the chaos and the escalation of the violence, it is unclear if there were calls for intervention or not, but a lot of them have at least felt some relief that the strikes at least stopped the violence for a bit. But this can also escalate sectarian tensions that already exist within the country.
Yeah, it's definitely volatile. Ghazi, good to have you in the studio. Thank you.